You are listening to episode 58. On today's episode, I get to interview Dani Cooper. I met Dani through a networking outdoor mental health event run by the Well Collaborative. And I'm sure as some of you have been listening to my podcast lately, I've had quite a few women from the Well Collaborative on this podcast. And I have to say, they're an inspirational group of women. So if you are in the city of Saskatoon, you should definitely join this collective group. But Dani was one of them. I met her at this outdoor event, and she is a mortgage broker, self-employed, but also part of the Mint Mortgage Group brand in Saskatoon. And I was very curious to ask her about the housing market and trends. And I just thought, this is someone I want to know more about. Little did I know that she has a very diverse background, starting from doing sales in the automotive industry to doing this mortgage brokerage, all the way to actually starting her own charity. You get to hear about her journey and more on today's episode. And by the way, if you've been enjoying these episodes, I would love if you would subscribe to me on Apple Podcasts. Please leave a review and let me know, how are you enjoying these episodes? Are they impacting you in any way? And you can also subscribe to me on Spotify. Now on with the episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Okiki podcast. And today I'm really excited to have a special guest, Dani Cooper. I actually met Dani at an event run by the Well in my city, and she said that she's a mortgage broker. And I was really curious to pick her brain because I'm sure if you've seen anything in real estate right now, it's been a very interesting time. And I just figured this was someone I'd like to learn a lot more about and probably has a lot of value to share with the audience. So thank you so much, Dani, for being on the show today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Just so you all know, Dani is a mortgage broker, self-employed, but she's part of the Mint Mortgage Broker brand. And also she had a successful career with the automotive industry. It's completely different. And then she also runs a charity, a registered charity called the Fertility Fund of Saskatchewan. So there's a lot going on your end, Dani, and I'd love to learn more about you. And what exactly was your educational path and career journey that led you into kind of these different hats that you carry today?
I have a pretty, I call it a vanilla story. I grew up in Saskatoon, two parents, grew up in Parkridge, went to high school, went to university into arts and science because that's what you did when you didn't really know what you wanted to do.
Yes.
I did not finish my arts and science degree. University was a little bit more of a challenge than I thought because high school wasn't. So I didn't really have the best study skills, if I'm being honest. And I was also later diagnosed with ADHD later in life. So that could maybe have something to do with it. But I wasn't very good at staying in boxes or being told what to do or doing it on anybody else's schedule but my own. So that didn't work out very well. I got into sales quite quickly during university and I was offered a pretty decent job. So I did leave university early prior to finishing. I spent 5 years in the automotive industry selling cars and then going into auto finance. And from there, I left in 2016. And that's when I signed my contract with Mint Mortgage. And the rest is kind of history. So yeah, it's just a little bit, I need to be like hands-on in work, learning while I'm doing. And that's just something that I had to acknowledge about myself and accept instead of fighting the good fight and trying to be someone I'm not. So that's kind of how it happened. And I'm really passionate about helping people get financially ahead and realizing what they can and cannot afford and the reason why they can't or can, or just, yeah. So I'm really, some of my favorite things to do is credit counsel people for a couple of years and then get them into a home when they broke the rental cycle is probably one of the biggest love moments of my career. But
That's really interesting because, well, I think we've kind of had our own dialogue around that, but just finding out, neurodiversity and how that even impacts your experiences. Because as I told you, I also was diagnosed with ADHD as an adult at that. So I did do university, but it was quite challenging, as you mentioned. It wasn't like a fun time. Like some people say, did you miss school? I'm like, no, that
No,
learning
not at
style
all.
didn't really cater to me, but somehow miraculously got through it.
Good
That in
for
itself
you.
felt
Give
like
yourself
a,
the these.
yeah, it felt like an achievement, right? But it's totally like neurodiversity and talking about how your mind works and how you actually are very strong in other areas as well. And that's another thing that isn't always acknowledged. So the fact that you had creative mind, like you said, you didn't feel like being in a box, and therefore, but you did super well in sales, car sales. And I find that interesting that from there you wanted to challenge yourself more and be more involved with people. And so you figured that being a mortgage broker would actually give you more of that.
Cars are, yes, they're a necessity, but car payments are getting quite expensive. And I just really wanted to help people get into a home. And that was just, I don't know, it was more important for me I wanted to be a part of like the biggest moment of their life. Like that is the biggest thing that most people will do in their life is purchase their home, picking out the home, the neighborhood they're going to live in, how long it will take them to save for that home. It is a lot of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars is never, it's just been a crazy thought in my mind. I grew up in Saskatoon, so I remember when houses were 100,000 and not 400,000. So it's just been a little bit of a different dynamic in the world now. And people do need some guidance to be able to afford those things. And if they aren't getting that from a parent or a mentor, they do need a resource.
That's really interesting. So when you were, branching into that field, I know that again, you're with a brand, but what were some of the initiatives that you had to take, I guess, to make yourself known to not only that brand that this is something you're passionate about, but to those clients to say, hey, I actually really want to help you with this journey and this experience that I guess in our generation, we can't just take for granted, or it doesn't come as easily
No,
compared to previous years.
no, it doesn't come as easily. And especially, unfortunately, we can say the C word, the COVID word, there is helping people navigate spousal buyouts because, relationships do break down or estate planning if there is, an illness in the family or if there's been a death. There's a lot more that goes into it than just that initial really exciting purchase moment. People's homes are their home and it carries a lot of their life in it. So you end up being on the road with them through a lot of different journeys as well, which can be an honor. And also it can be a hard time for some people if marriages break down or there's illnesses or sickness in the world, but it is part of life. And if you can kind of make that transition the easiest for someone, then you can lighten their load a little bit. So I really was passionate about Mint Mortgage. The founder, Sarah, she was the only one I wanted to work with. So my only window to meet her was a 6 a.m. coffee, and I took it. And I was like, listen, I want to work for you. And that is just how it's going to be. So she took me on and she mentored me, and it's been a life-changing experience. And she gave me the freedom to open up my time a little bit too and not work 80 hours a week like the car industry. And that what gave me the freedom to start the foundation too. So my life changed a lot in the last 5 years.
That's just the last 5 years. I also wanted to ask, what were some of the values that really attracted you to working with that mentor in terms of how you wanted to really shape your career? Because it seems like it was something you really thought out before you just went into the industry.
It was her background, where she came from, how she treats people. Our motto is that every mortgage has a story. Like it's not a number. It is a human component. People can have past, people can have things that happen to them, or they've done things to affect their, financial security or credibility or whatever you want to call it. But everyone is human and everyone has stories, and those stories are important. It's not just black and white sometimes on the page. A lot of the policies and procedures it is, but there's a story that you can get to know someone, and you can, I don't know, she was very, she's worked her whole way up and she's done everything herself. And
Wow.
she's an inspiration to me, and the way that she treats people was the biggest thing. And I was like, I want to work for that company. I don't want to work for a company that's like well, if you're not spending $300,000, I don't have time for you. Or if you're not spending $400,000, I don't have time for you. Or I'm not saying that there's people out there like that, but I was really, really wanting to align myself with people that the human component was there. And that was the biggest thing for me.
That's really interesting. And what were some of the biggest, I guess, learning curves and obstacles for you when you first joined into this space? I know I've seen this one lady on TikTok. I believe she has a mortgage brokerage too, and she's gotten quite popular. And she was just teaching lessons. And it was really fascinating because there's so much I wanted to learn about real estate, and she just made it so accessible. And it was also, I guess, I don't know, maybe it's just my perspective, different seeing a lady who was leading something like that. So I'm curious about your perspective too. And like, yeah.
It was crazy when I first got licensed. A lot of the rules had just changed on a dime, and anytime any regulatory body changes the rules regarding mortgages, the media jumps on board, and there's a lot of fear in people that, you know, the next generation's never going to be able to buy a house, and they're changing this and they're changing that. So I got in at a really weird time where I was just licensed and had about a month to get people into the old rules, or they would have to qualify in the new rules. And it was a pretty drastic swing at that time in 2016. And the province was going away with the grad retention program. So there's a lot of people that, you know, were banking on that for their down payment. And then it went away very quickly when they make the decision. It's not like they give you a 6 month, oh, by the way, in 6 months, we'll be taking that away. So it was a pretty hectic time. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy. But like anything, if you break it down into chunks and you learn from the right people, and there is some people that are amazing trainers that I personally wouldn't be able to learn from. You have to find someone that can teach the way that you learn, in my professional opinion. Some people are textbook studiers, some people are learn by doing, and you sort of find someone that will break it down for you the way that you learn. But it was refreshing, and it was a challenge, and it was really fun. And I will never forget the first time a mortgage application came in from a referral, like to me specifically. Those feelings, well, you know, the first time you got to see someone take the keys of their first house, those are things that I don't think will ever get old, or I'll ever forget.
That's a really good note. And it kind of segues into, I guess, another question related to that. So one of the conversations we had was about how COVID obviously affected the housing market. Now, initially, from my own logic, I would have thought, oh, nobody's going to buy anything, but it seems to be the opposite. And I'm hearing like record high home buying, not only in like, you know, the States or like Canada, but even in Saskatoon. So for some of our audience listening, who's even just curious about learning more about the space, or if it's ever crossed their mind, I was just curious about you sharing your perspective on this, given that you're actually in this space. And do you have any idea why this is happening, and how has that affected the people you work with?
I think that obviously COVID impacts a lot of people with their jobs, but for the people that weren't impacted and they got to pivot quickly and work from home, or maybe they were working from home prior to that, and that was just their life, or they could kind of, you know, work from wherever. And when places shut down and there wasn't as many coffee shops to go work in, then they're working from their kitchen table. Right. But what I feel the biggest tipping point was interest rates were historically low, and people weren't spending those $2,000, $5,000, $10,000 vacations anymore. So that's almost a down payment rate there on, you know, a few vacations. I don't think people realize either what that muffin and coffee in the morning costs every day, and going out for lunch, if you're not just going to grab a wrap for $8, but maybe you're going to a sit down restaurant. Well, chances are with, you know, a pop and a tip and a tax and everything, that's $30. And trust me, I love a good lunch out. So it's just as bad. But when you compound that and parking downtown near gas, what people were spending a month in just incidentals that you don't even really notice that you're doing when you're at home, when you're locked down and you can't do those things anymore, you don't realize that they can add up to hundreds and hundreds of dollars a month. And that can maybe be the difference between a $300,000 purchase and a $400,000 purchase. And that mortgage payment difference is what they were paying in coffees and incidentals. But that bigger house gets them that one more bedroom with the office, and they can work from home with the door shut with kids, rather than at the living room table or the kitchen table or anything like that. So I think that people's priorities shifted a little bit.
So you're saying, like, even, I guess from your opinion, Of course, driving, like if they had to drive into, their office every day, that would add up a lot. But even things as small as like having that reduced coffees or those reduced lunches out really gave them that much more financial leverage in terms of home buying. That's really interesting. Yeah. So do you think that's why it's just kind of skyrocketed everywhere?
Well,
And
I also, and this is, I mean, it could be whatever. I have no idea if I'm correct here, but I also, most people and the way that the families are these days, both parents are typically working, kids are, in 3 different activities, and people are just like ships in the night, and they're just passing each other, and they're barely spending any time in their homes. So and maybe it was like, hey, yeah, this is our starter home. We're never going to stay here. But then 10 years down the road, they're like, it'll do. But then a year into staying at your home every day, and it wasn't your dream home, and it didn't actually fit your needs or your wants. And after you sat in it for a year, because it's the first time you ever spent any time in your house,
that's a really good point.
This is not my happy place, and I want something else. Maybe, and it forced people to finish those basements that never finished them. And it, because they needed that space, and they had the time to do it, because those recreational things were cut down to nothing almost. So I think that people, it was the first time they could sit in their home and realize if it brought them joy or if it brought them anxiety or, any of those things. So I think people are just like, if I'm not going to be able to travel and do anything, I'm either going to do a reno to make my house the way I want it, or I'm going to sell it and buy the house I want. So I give people that push, I believe, for the people that weren't affected financially, like with their jobs.
Really good points you brought up that, I didn't think of it that way. And of course, this probably comes from you working with your clients and really understanding their story and their experience. Like, yes, you're in this home every day. Like, does it feel good anymore? Is it kind of uncomfortable now? Like all of those factors. I don't know if this is another area you work in too, but I remember asking you about even commercial real estate and like, do you think they're having similar things to, the homes, or is it completely different?
I don't do commercial mortgages a whole heck of a lot, truthfully, but I would suspect that it could be a challenge because there's a lot of businesses that aren't going back to work. They've made contingent plans, and they're allowing their workers to work from home if that's what they would prefer. And again, with a lot of businesses too, if people are working from home, well, you're not paying that coffee guy to come around and fill up the coffee pot with, whatever those, you're not paying the Culligan man to bring the Culligan, you're not paying the rugs to get cleaned at the front door, because there was no foot traffic for a year in a lot of those commercial towers. So I feel like people forget how much the soft costs are to running a business.
Right.
Like even the toilet paper, I hate to say it, but like power, like everything costs money. And when you have those expenses and people are, they're using their own washrooms, they're using their own coffee, because they're working from home, that actually can cut down an overhead.
Yeah, significantly. And so, and thank you for sharing that, Dani, because I bring that up because I think unless my listeners are having regular conversations with people like you, these are a lot of factors that they may not think about. And I think it is a really interesting situation. So I guess for you as, a self-employed mortgage broker, this was actually a very busy time, I would assume, because of all of these changes happening. And
it was, and we were digital since I started 5 years ago. So really, like, we all had our offices downtown, we all had our office at home. So our lives didn't change much at all, minus more Zoom meetings and then not in person. But a lot of people with their busy schedules chose to do Zoom anyway. So my working life did not change, unfortunately.
Not too much. I was curious too, even as you're saying that with Zoom, has your business always been focused on local clients, or do you do across Canada? And was that something that expanded, I guess, as a result of the whole digital situation as well?
We've always been digital, so we can definitely do mortgages nationally. So we do. I would say that the bulk of my clients are Saskatoon and area and Regina. So they're more provincial. Mint Mortgage as a whole, like we do have, because even if you don't mean to, sometimes, if your first client might be with you for 5 years in Saskatoon and then move somewhere else. And then they tell their friends about you. So then you might have a pocket in Calgary. And if one of them moves somewhere else, then it kind of grows organically if clients are happy with you. So I wouldn't say if it grew because of COVID, because we've always been digital that way. So it wouldn't have impacted how we conducted business on a daily basis. So I don't think that changed our like national stage at all.
Really interesting and really good to know, because a lot of the businesses that were positioned digitally were the ones that, of course, did very well. I also want to talk about another passion of yours, because as you mentioned, since becoming a mortgage broker, you had more freedom and control with your time, and you were able to work on other passions, including this charity, which I have so much respect for that you founded and you're running, because a nonprofit is not an easy thing to even, let alone a charity, to manage. So do you mind, sharing that with our audience and that process? And I'd love to just really give you a chance to talk about that.
Sure. The process was pretty naive, if I'm being honest. I knew that I was always someone that went to every fundraiser I was, invited to. And I believe that when you have when you can, you should support your community. But I knew that I always kind of wanted to take a bigger initiative and run one. But I was struggling for many years and what that would look like and where those funds would go to. I have a very huge community of really amazing supportive people in my life. So I was like, well, I can throw parties and donate money, which is basically the naive starting of it, thinking that I could just throw parties and donate money. It turns out it's a lot more work than that, and which I found out after the ball was already rolling, so it was too late to turn back. And then in doing finance and seeing the financial toll of some couples going through infertility, I personally don't have children, nor do I have the desire to have children of my own. But I firmly believe that women should have choice in their lives, and that choice shouldn't come with a $20,000 price tag. So I reached out to a girlfriend of mine that we'd previously worked together, putting ourselves to university. And she'd gone through secondary infertility and wrote a blog about it and was pretty vocal about her challenges and her journey. And so I reached out to her and said, hey, I have this idea. I think that we should raise money and donate to families in Saskatchewan going through infertility.
Wow.
And she was like, well, you're crazy. And why would you want me? And she's like, I don't know how to start a charity. And I was like, well, either do I, but we're going to learn. And so she jumped on board that day over coffee, and she's like, you know what? Yeah, sure, I'm in. And we started researching how to start a nonprofit.
Yeah.
That's where we were at. And we met with the one doctor at the fertility clinic here and just asked their kind of guidance and their take. Like, do you think that we're crazy? Do you think this is something that is A, needed, B, could be done regarding privacy laws and all that good stuff? And she almost had tears in her eyes, and she was like, absolutely, this is so needed. So, giving that, like, they were very supportive. They aren't involved in the charity at all, but we just thought that would be a good, place to ask if it was needed. So they were like, absolutely. So we went, and they gave us the name of another lady that worked for Global at the time. And so she jumped on board as a co-founding member as well. And so we kind of, the three of us back in so the idea when it came to me, end of 2016, beginning of 2017. That's when I met with Kelsey, was beginning of 2017. We were registered by July, and we funded our first family that Christmas, and they had twins.
Oh my goodness.
That money was real hard though, because no one knew anything about what we were trying to do. So we were flipping burgers outside of Canadian Tire on the weekends. But
wow,
we've gone up from there. So we're no longer flipping burgers on the weekend.
Oh my goodness. Well, there's so much to that. I mean, first of all, it's an interesting space because, like, how do you connect with those families on such a vulnerable topic to be like, hey, we want to help you out? And like, there's so many, I feel like there could be a whole other podcast on that. And like, how did you even get into a vulnerable space like that and make the connections with those families who could really use the funding? How do you actually explain that this is what your organization is doing? And like, we're literally raising money for people to spend on this. Like, there's just so many interesting questions within that. And then how did it feel to have that first family go, oh my gosh, we were actually able to have children because of you guys? Like, that must be an overwhelming feeling.
I think that, well, I have to say that when we launched this and we were like, hey, infertility community, we are here. A, give us grace because we don't really know what we're doing, but B, we want to help. And we're not sure how that's going to look at the start. They were so welcoming. That community is full of freaking warriors, pardon my French. These women and these men have walked through hell and back, and they still have a smile on their face sometimes, which is shocking to me. They've been great. They've welcomed us with open arms. They've given us positive feedback. They've given us negative feedback when we need it. They've been just super incredible. So that wasn't an issue at all. Some people were like, thank you so much for opening up a conversation about this, because it's getting more common now. But even 4 years ago when we started the foundation, there wasn't as much knowledge out there in the groups of people that I know. That it's 1 in 6 couples in Canada right now. So you can't tell me that you don't know someone that's going through it, because you do. Whether
Definitely.
you know it or not, you do.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
And some couples spend up to 100,000 or more. Like, that's a lot of money. The average treatment cost, I would say, is about 15.
Yeah.
Depending on what you're doing, but that's no guarantee either. And some people are doing 3, 4, 5 rounds of that.
That's such an interesting space. I honestly, like, we'll have to have an off-channel chat about about that. But no, I didn't realize it was that high. But of course, I know a lot of couples who've gone through that. So even you giving me that data is super helpful to try and be, as empathetic and compassionate as I can with some of these individuals I meet, for sure. Yeah. And then even structurally too, there's so much that goes into a nonprofit. I know there's usually boards involved. And then you talked about getting being a charity so you can actually do, the tax receipts and everything. So I guess someone listening to you and seeing, oh my gosh, Dani's, doing her self-employment and she's really doing super well with the mortgage brokerage, and she managed to start this charity. Like, where do I begin? What if they have like a feeling in their heart that they want to really help with a cause? What would you advise them on how to start with that and where to go?
It depends on how deep you want to go. If you want to volunteer almost a full-time job for the rest of your life, then start one. And it's real fun. It does. It's probably one of the proudest things that it's the thing that I've done in my life that I'm most proud of. Absolutely. Even if that's not as far as you want to go, pick an initiative, pick something that's close to your heart. Sometimes when you're volunteering, not only do you meet the people that you're helping, even the other volunteers, like, it can just be so much fun for a day. Like, it doesn't have to be this like, oh, I volunteered and spent this many of my hours volunteering. I can guarantee you that if you spend your time, or your money for that matter, and you change someone's life with it, you get something out of it, because it makes you feel real good. Like, it is that, I don't know, everyone should volunteer. I think that it should be a mandatory thing that you have to pay tax and volunteer. It's good for the heart and soul. It is.
Yeah.
Just do it.
I'm sure there's so many studies that could prove what you're saying, for sure, as well, in terms of that. No, I just have so much respect for that, like, as I mentioned with my role, but what you did with this is incredible. And how long has that foundation that you started been in existence? And you said you're no longer flipping burgers. So what has been your most recent status with the foundation in terms of getting people involved to help you?
I don't have the exact data off the top of my head. I should know this. We funded over 20 families since July of 2017. And we have 7, we call them FFS wish babies, the Family Fertility Fund. So we have 7 children that are Earthside that we help their parents with funding. Yeah. And it's about 3 or 4 more on the way. And it's been incredible. We've moved from the burger flipping. We have 2 biggest fundraisers that have happened previously. And then we have one that's going to be our biggest to date if we can sell out, that's actually actively ongoing right now, that it's in its first year. But typically in April is the Infertility Awareness Week. And we end the week with a walk in Saskatoon and a walk in Regina.
Awesome.
The last 2 years, they haven't been able to happen. But we will be back in 2022, guns a-blazing. And then we have a brunch gala in the fall, which will be October 3rd this year. So we only missed 1 year from 2020 there. We were hoping in 2020, we had it all planned to bring it to Regina as well as Saskatoon. With that being canceled last year and us not being sure whether we were going to reopen this year, we were unable to bring it to Regina as planned. So we are just doing one in Saskatoon. But it will be our third annual Brunch for Babies Gala. We had our first gala in 2018. We sold out the top of the inn at 110 people. Our next year, we went to Remy, hoping that we could grow into that room, and we sold out that room in our second year.
Wow.
And tickets I had to put the tickets on hold because I think that we've already sold out, and I haven't done the seating arrangement yet. So there might be 3 to 5 more tables that I might be able to release tickets for, but we're planning on being sold out at 280 at the Besbro this year.
Wow. So
and
these galas have really, really taken off.
Yeah. And we've
That's
sold
amazing.
There's 230 seats reserved already for the October one. And then right now we're currently raffling off 2021 Chevrolet Traverse Redline Premier Edition. Tickets are $40, and the vehicle will be raffled off at the end of the month.
Wow. Congratulations, first of all.
Thank you.
Again, just seeing the growth, definitely. I don't know, we may have to do another one where we just talk about this foundation alone and how you really got the tools to set it up the way you set it up. One pattern I do see with both is that you had an interest in changing people's lives. So whether it's your for-profit job versus the nonprofit situation, it seems like the theme for you as an individual, from what I'm hearing, is what can I do to help better these individuals' lives? So it's kind of cool because I think when your values are there and you find the things that you like, you can actually recreate that in different spaces. So it's really cool to hear. And yeah, congrats to you on both. And thank you so much for sharing the value today. Where can our audience find you? And is there anything you want our audience to know about to support you in?
Yeah, just head to our website. It's www.familyfertilityfund.com. You can Google us. We have an Instagram page and a Facebook page. On Instagram, I'm Dani YXE because I am not creative in some regards. So that was all. And yeah, we'd love to see you at an event or buy a raffle ticket for the vehicle. SMP is helping us sponsor that one. So they've been fabulous to deal with. So it's good. And we just funded more families, and our application will open up again in the next couple months. So if anyone's out there that's listening that needs to, that would need some help in funding for their treatment, the grants are $5,000 typically. They can apply, and believe the application process should be open in September, October. We just changed it this year. We used to read them over Christmas, and it was just a lot of work over Christmas. So we just changed
I can only imagine.
We just changed our schedule now. So, but we should have another round of granting happening in the next month or two. So if anyone's needing help or resources there, just look us up.
That's awesome. Thank you again, Dani. I've been super inspired by this episode. And just thank you for being on the show and sharing your value with the audience today.
Well, thank you for having me. It was my pleasure.